about 4 or 5 years now. And we do elevation for the nonprofit community. And it's an opportunity for us as a foundation to have a conversation, usually dive into a topic very deeply. We've covered such things as finances and how to do cost accounting, what comprises a really good grant. And we try to impart to the nonprofits some skill that they can walk away from. And we were talking this last fall about perhaps doing one for our donors, an educational process to take a look at where we're at as a foundation and where we're going. And hitting 2020, it provided us an opportunity to take a look into the next 10 years and some of the trends that we're going to be seeing, and then not only globally, but in our communities. As a foundation, it's really important that we are continually looking down the highway. Because things are going to occur that are going to affect what we do and how we operate and how we respond. So it's very important that we're looking at what's coming, what's going to be affecting the community, and then that we're able to start to build an infrastructure to respond to that. Do I yell at it, Chris?
Turn it on.
Yeah, turn it on. Yeah, that's usually all. Yeah. So some of the megatrends that we're seeing that are going to be moving forward are going to be these three: innovation, people, and the earth, which is climate change. Techceleration is a topic that is going to affect all of our lives. And it took 64 years for 50 million people to use airplanes. It took 62 years for 50 million people to use cars. It took Pokemon Go 19 days. So it's pretty amazing. When you think about technology, how fast we can provide information. So everything is happening way faster. And we see that in our lives in so many different ways. And at the foundation, we're experiencing that as well. 100 million people will fall below the poverty line because of climate change and food scarcity over the next 10 years. And that's a number that's coming out of the World Health Organization, which is sort of scary. And what is that going to look like? And how is that going to affect global politics? There'll be an electrification of transportation by the end of the 2020s, with a third of all cars being sold will be electric. And so that means something for our community. If a third of cars in Elmore County are going to be electric, where are they going to plug in? Where the accessible stations going to be? Who's going to pay for those? How are we going to support that sort of an infrastructure? Big change. And there's a race for technology superiority. There's talk right now that there may be two internet systems. So we'll have a US protocol and a China protocol. And so we'll see the internet diverge into two separate directions. So one that is going to be much more open, and one that's going to be much more controlled. And then there's the bangs versus the bats. And this was something that I was just reading about a month ago when I was putting this together. As there is now a working group of Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google versus the other three that you see up there: Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent Holding. And and there's this race for technology superiority by these groups, and they're working together. And a lot of it has to do with artificial intelligence, and that will be the next wave. And when we think about artificial intelligence, how is that going to affect our life in this community? How will it manifest itself? And whenever something manifests itself as brand new, it's usually good and bad. And so what will be the bad component? So the new technology road, in 2022, Amazon has plans for launching 3,200 nanosatellites that will then encompass the globe so that there's total internet connection. Now, SpaceX is also launching satellites now. And the gentleman that started Tesla is also launching satellites. So we're going to have a lot of satellite coverage around our globe. I was talking to somebody about this over the weekend, and I thought, what a perfect opportunity to create a new business. It'd be Acme Space Waste Management. Because somebody's going to need to clean up all that stuff when they start flying. But how that affects us in El Dorado County is we're going to have so many places in El Dorado County that we'll be able to connect to the internet if you're up in the Divide, or if you're in South County, or you're in Chino Springs on French Creek Road, where I live. And the broadband is like barely broadband and drops off. This is really going to make a huge change in how we access information and move into that stream of information in the community. So everything global affects regional, everything regional does not affect global. So we're really affected as a community by things that are happening globally. And it affects the investments of the foundation. So we watch what's occurring globally, but we act regionally and focus on regional issues. In 1980, there were 15 physical barriers around the world installed by countries. Today, there are 77. So that's just as an indicator that as a global community, we're becoming much more nationalistic and starting to create borders to try to solve problems within our particular zones of influence. And that will raise conflict, which goes back to something globally happens, the stock market reacts. So the stock market reacted this morning over the norovirus. And then it recouped again later in the afternoon and rebounded. But the stock market is a very jittery place, but it's also a place that we do our investment. But we keep out of the jittery stuff. We don't invest in that. So countries are each facing their own unique challenges. And in this decade, we will have more grandparents than grandchildren. There'll be more people over 65 than children under 5. That's pretty astounding. And that moves us into domestically the silver economy. And that's what they're now calling the 2020 era. It's going to be the silver economy, which I'm a member of. So. In this decade, those over 65 holds more than 50% of the spending dollars. And currently, they're only doing 10% of the spending. So there's a lot of wealth accumulation that's happening. And the winners of an older domestic populations are looking for investment opportunities. These are the cruise lines, home renovation, healthcare and retirement communities, and I'm sure I'll be looking for one, and life insurance. So those are the different economies that will be moving forward because we're becoming older. I'm not sure about the cruise lines though. They take a little hit.
You never know.
Yeah. So Generation Z, or those born after 2000, will have more of an impact than millennials. They're 20% of the population. They've been born with a cell phone in their hand. And they're focused on sustainability of services rather than goods. That, and you think about it domestically, the United States is driven by consumerism. If we're raising a whole generation that's not interested in that, what will that look like? And how will that affect job creation? They will forego the purchase of cars and will use non-traditional forms of payment. So that's something that the foundation started to invest in, is learning about cryptocurrencies and how that whole system of blockchain works, because we're going to start seeing more and more of it. The Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which is the richest community foundation in the world, at about, the last time I looked, they were at 11 billion. A lot of that fund that they hold is cryptocurrency that's coming out of Silicon Valley. And they're also reluctant to seek post-secondary education because all they see is debt and no reward at the end of it. And this term, and if you hear somebody use it, it's not a compliment. So I learned that recently. I was talking to somebody and was talking about the 60s, and they were like, okay, boomer. And I thought, well, is that a compliment? No. So we're going to see a smart everything, and it's going to accelerate. One of the futurists that I was reading from Bank of America was saying that in the next 10 years, we're going to see the last 20 years of tech growth compressed in a very short period of time. So it's going to be pretty amazing. There'll be 500 billion connectable smart devices by the end of this decade. By 2025, it will connect with smart devices every 18 seconds. Yeah, I took my car in this morning and had it repaired, and they gave me a loaner while they were working on my car. My car is 4 years old, and I had to sit in the parking lot for like about 15 minutes to figure out how this loaner worked. Because the technology has already changed. And everything was on a screen where I swiped to access different components of the car. And I was astounded how in a 4-year period of time it has all changed. Yeah, smart car. Today's global data is multiplying itself every 2 to 3 years. It's pretty phenomenal. And we are using 1% of it. So we're accumulating this huge amount of data, but we really aren't using it. And as a foundation, we're just as guilty. We fall into this. We accumulate a lot of data, but we really haven't started to dive into that data and what it means. And in the next 10 years, that's one thing that we will be doing as a foundation, is diving deeper into our data to look at giving patterns and effectiveness of the grants that we're making. So the future of philanthropy. Our current foundation system is designed for internal use. So the foundation has an information management system called FIMS. And it's really designed for an internal organizational use and not a donor interface. So we're looking at changing that. So it's been a great tool for us. It's very complex. Is Sakina still there? Yeah, she's in the back, who is the queen of FIMS. Sakina is so talented in that system that other community foundations call her to find out how to do something. She's been to trainings, and sometimes she'll train the trainer. So it's going to be a real evolution for us as a foundation to be able to go to this new platform. The new system is going to incorporate you. So when I look at this in terms of wording, as a foundation, we have reacted with our donors, or interacted with our donors. That's a better word, interacted with our donors in a very passive way. And now we're going to change that. And we're going to start actively engaging in your giving by providing you some tools. So a lot of people in the room have funds, and you'll be able to go onto the foundation website and access your fund profile. At any time, you'll be able to look at what your fund is, how much is in your fund, what the activity of the fund is, what's been granted, what you may have available to grant. So it's going to become much more interactive for you. And you'll have full access to your fund activity and profile. And you'll also have access to organizational profiles on effectiveness. So we think about the nonprofit community in El Dorado County. You're going to be able to go on and bring up any of the nonprofits, look at what they're doing, and also be able to judge their effectiveness of the work that they're doing. Now we're going to take our nonprofits on this journey with us because it's really important because donors are changing. My parents gave, I invest. If I'm looking for where I'm going to give, it's to an organization that has some ability to quantify the work that they're doing. So I want to know that my investment is paying off. So it'll become a portal for research and funding charitable projects and organizations. And how we will do that is you'll be able to look at grant requests as they come into the foundation. So we'll be figuring this out with you and with the staff of the foundation. But what we envision now is you'll be able to log in as a donor and you'll see all the active grants that have come into the foundation, and you'll be able to self-select if you want to fully fund something or partly fund something that has come in as a community need. So again, it becomes much more interactive between the donor and the organization. So you're fully informed on what you're funding. And those generational shifts are transforming philanthropy. So I talked a little bit about that generational shift from what my mom and dad did, which was give, to myself, which was investing. Somebody could call my mom on the phone and say, you know, we're raising money for Cancer Society in the United States, and she'd say, okay, well, I'll give you $100. And I'm going to ask them how much of the money that I give you is actually going towards the organization, towards work that is going to be helping and assisting individuals. So I had somebody call a couple weeks ago, and it was one of those calls on raising funds, and I asked that question, and they said 80 cents of every dollar goes to this campaign. So 20 cents of what I would give would go to actual service, to wounded warriors. The rest was going to the fundraising campaign. So it's important as donors to be a little skeptical about what you're giving to, and making sure that the funds are going to go to the purpose. So that's called a restricted gift. So if you write a $100 check out to the Red Cross, that's unrestricted. They can do anything they want with the funds. But if you write on the memo line on that check, this is to be used for blankets, that's a restricted gift. And under Internal Revenue Service guidelines, they have to buy blankets for that fund, or ask your permission to make the change. So virtual giving will become something I'm sure we're going to see by the end of the decade, along with some sort of interface with artificial intelligence. We're going to see more apps that are going to start coming forward. GoFundMe, Kickstarter have moved forward. There was a lot of excitement in the nonprofit community about GoFundMe, that it was going to be the Midas for every nonprofit. You just need to do a GoFundMe page and the world would be bright and sunny and everything would be good. And money would just be pouring in. That didn't happen. And GoFundMe is great for that instant $10 to somebody that has experienced some sort of traumatic hardship in their life. So you'll see stories of a family that's struggling because their 13-year-old child is going through chemotherapy. And mom and dad have stopped working, and so they need some funding. That's what GoFundMe works for, but not as a fundraising mechanism. And I just saw this morning that Kickstarter is unionizing. So that'll be interesting. but we'll see more apps come and go. Indicators of success will drive investment over the cause. So this is a conversation that's starting to happen within the Community Foundation world, is investment over cause. So again, my mom and dad were very identified with cause. And I'm looking at investment. What am I giving to, and is there a benefit from that gift? So it's in finance, it's an ROI, return on your investment. Philanthropy is ROG, return on your gift. Social media connections have become more and more important. And it's having that presence. Right now it's TikTok. And I'm not sure that as a foundation we want to start trying to build philanthropy with 8 and 12-year-olds. Maybe it's never too early to start. That seems a little young to me. Blockchain and the rise of cryptocurrency. So as a foundation, we're going to have to start learning, how does that work? How do we incorporate that? And how do you bank it? How do you report it? How do you report the earnings? So who is giving? Millennials, and baby boomers. Millennials are 26% of the population, and they do 11% of the giving. 56% of their giving is spontaneous. Baby boomers are 23% of the population, do 43% of the giving. 72% of the giving is planned. So you see this radical difference between the two. And what we give to, we're engaged across all sectors of donor interest. So as a foundation, we're funding a little bit of everything throughout El Dorado County. We work as a foundation on your behalf as donors with every willing partner that wants to partner with the foundation. And I think the key word there is willing. There's a lot of times you can lead a horse to water but you can't make it drink. And we will see solutions and provide them for opportunities to help something move forward. But sometimes organizations are severely entrenched in what they believe in. And when that occurs, as a foundation, we just quietly step back. It's not our role to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. We're just trying to help move forward the biggest issues in the community, and through collaboration. And sometimes that can be hard. We started a process in South Lake Tahoe. One of the big issues we're facing, not only in El Dorado County, but across the state of California, is housing. We started a process of having a conversation with the South Lake Tahoe area on housing 5 years ago. We are just now starting to see the fruition of that 5 years of work, where we now have a model. It's a land bank model, land bank and land trust, that is going to help provide sustainable, affordable housing in the Lake Tahoe region. But it took us 5 years to get there. So you have to be willing to stay in the game, stay engaged, and work through multiple problems. Lead with clear purpose and an exit strategy. The foundation is a staff of 5 people. And we're dealing with a lot of complexity in the community and a lot of different funds and representing you as donors. And so whenever we engage into something as a foundation, it's my responsibility as a director to always make sure that we have an exit strategy of how we lead. That we hand it off at some point, because community problems don't stop. We need to hand off at the right time, in the right way, and move on to the next, whatever issue it is or opportunity is presenting itself. So right now, so you know how many funds do we have?
280-ish.
280-ish?
Yeah.
So that is a lot of donors And that activity is consistently happening every single day. So last year we granted out 1.5 million, and that is coming from people like you, our donors. And El Dorado County is a county of 184,000 people. That is a huge impact when you're able to deliver that kind of resource back into communities. One of the primary work that funding goes towards is youth development. So if you look at our pie chart as a foundation, repeatedly, year after year, you'll see a lot of funding going towards youth development. One of the places that we need to do some work is older adults, and making sure that they have the resources and the funding that they need. Because we're going to see a lot more older adults. Another area is arts and culture. So if we're in an urban environment, we're going to see the number one on the pie chart usually is arts and culture. Then when you move into a rural community, it tends to flip. But arts and culture is still a very important part of our lives. And financially supporting that is very important. This is about the quality of where we live and the experience of where we live. Seek investment opportunities that benefit community. And we're currently doing that right now. The foundation is looking at and has applied for an economic development grant from the federal government to purchase a building on Placerville and open a co-working space. Economic development needs to be a part of what we're doing as a foundation to bring new jobs to the area, new jobs for 2020, for people that don't want a large office and want to work in a co-working environment. So we want to, as a foundation, working with our donors, to develop solutions that work. Donor advised funds, a lot of individuals in the room tonight have a donor advised funds. There's a conversation happening with the Internal Revenue Service and the Department of Treasury around to regulate or not to regulate donor advised funds. And the reason why this is happening is because we have seen an explosion of donor advised funds at investment houses. So Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, all have donor advised funds. And the Internal Revenue Service has a little bit of a problem with a donor having a charitable fund held at the same place where their investment is. So they see that as a conflict. And they're looking at how to solve that conflict. There's a huge amount of money that is now being warehoused in donor advised fund at these investment houses and is sitting dormant. So if you get an appreciated stock or another investment that's turned profit, it's capital gain, but by putting it in a donor advised fund, it escapes the taxation. So that's why we see this parallel of investment and charitable arm. The donor doesn't ever have to instruct their fund to move money to a charity. So there's no requirement. So they can just sit there. I called Vanguard because I was curious of how that would work. And I said I would like to set up a donor advised fund. They said, great, this is what our minimum is. And I said, okay, I'll put that in. And so can you tell me about where I can do my giving in El Dorado County? The guy goes, no, I don't even know where El Dorado County is. So you're not going to get that interaction from them. So again, that's another reason why they tend to just be warehoused. So the regulations that they're looking at is to require distribution of donor advised fund donations within a fixed number of years. So currently they're looking at a 7-year time frame of saying within 7 years or 5 years, you have to start expensing money out of your donor advised fund. Or they'll delay the tax deduction to donors until the funds are paid out to active charities. And there's also looking at change the management fees so that they no longer increase as a result of the size of the finance set. which is interesting. It's basically they're feeding their own system. And this shows that the IRS really means business. So the 2017 tax law, there is now, a part of that tax law, there's a 1.4 excise tax on investment income at private colleges and universities with endowments worth $500,000 per student. Because the federal government has said if you have that much per student and you're not delivering those funds back to the students to decrease student loans, we're now going to start charging you this 1.5 excise tax on your investment income. So it's a way to penalize them. So in the change in giving it to investment models to move from program support to organizational support. So typically, donors for generations have offered funding to programs. So you think about Boys and Girls Club, or Big Brother, Big Sister, or CASA, is that you're funding the program itself, not the organizational operation structure. And there's a problem with that. So it's not to take away that the program doesn't need funding, it does. But the organization needs funding as well, because you get what you pay for. And for a long period of time, we as a society have been funding nonprofits at a real mediocre level. And we get real mediocre results. And we need to change that. Because if we want excellence, we have to pay for it. And it's expensive. Excellence costs money. I had a conversation with David Ashby from New Morning, and he was telling me how hard it was to keep really good therapists on staff because he couldn't pay them, but somebody else could. And that makes a difference. If we're not paying the staff of the organization the salary they need, then they're going to hire somebody that's going to do an okay job. And is that good enough for our kids? No. They should have the best. So we need to invest in the organization, as well as still support the program. As we grow as a foundation, the amount of money, the funds that we have available in the community are now going to allow us to start moving in that direction of doing impact granting. We want to affect the organization, not the program. We'll still do program support, but we're going to start targeting particular nonprofits to move them forward so that they have the funding they need to build organizationally. So right now, when I started the foundation in 2007, the foundation had 1 grant cycle. We're now up to 10. That shows another growth. And those 10 grant cycles are per program. So we have a lot of funding going out per program. That's why it has changed now for us when we look at the foundation endowment about moving into impact granting. Sustainability is going to drive organizations to evaluate the program. If you're working in corporate America, that's something we do. It's just a natural, it's like breathing. You look at your profit centers, what's profitable, what's not, you need to jettison out and figure out why it's not. So it's happening within the nonprofit sector. It's starting to occur where they're analyzing what is it that we're doing, and are we doing it effectively and efficiently? Do we have great results? Or is this something that somebody else is doing and we're just duplicating a process? We're also going to see more and more nonprofits start to monetize themselves to create sustainable organizations. So to see a nonprofit go into another venture. So as a foundation, we own the building that we reside in Placerville. So we have tenants and they bring in passive income to us. So that is a way to monetize the foundation operations so that we are able to build ourselves internally without having to raise any fees. So we're consistently looking at how do you monetize the organization? Is there a way? It was a great conversation. I hope John Sanders has left. But I had with the board of the Upper Room. And they're trying to figure out how do we stay sustainable. So we feed anybody that needs a meal, but we're constantly in this fundraising mechanism. And I look behind me and there's a commercial kitchen. And they have all these volunteers. And the first thing I think of is, are you doing catering? And if not, why not? Why would you offer catering services? There's a lot of community events. You could do weddings, other events in the community, and bring in additional revenue. And you already have the setup to make it happen. And you have the volunteer base to do it. And it's something you're already doing. And so it's organizationally looking at different ways that they can monetize themselves, make a profit, and help sustain the organization. And if you create a sustainable organization, you create sustainable programs, which creates positive results, which creates impact. We're moving into areas that have not traditionally been funded. Talked a little bit about housing. Housing, I think, especially over the next 2 years, we're going to be doing a lot around housing. One of the things we learned as a foundation was the housing study that was done in South Lake Tahoe provided such a wealth of data and information about what type of housing was needed, where it was needed, what price rentals should be, that we need to repeat that on the Western Slope and start to look at that data and be prepared, because housing is affecting us here. Whenever I go out in the Western Slope and I walk into Starbucks or I walk into Toga's, I always ask whoever is helping me, where do you live? And they live in Natomas, Rancho Cordova, and they're coming from off the hill. And I ask, why don't you live here? It's too expensive. Climate change, we are going to definitely be hearing more and more about that. We're living in it right now. This month looks like it'll be the single driest month in February in the history of the state. We're in the middle of winter, and it's 72 degrees outside. We've seen incredible bushfires in Australia. Whether or not we believe in it, there's things we can do to decrease our imprint. Healthcare, that is also going to become a big issue. The foundation's working now with the El Dorado County Health Ministry. They're looking at how do they build up capacity. And they're looking at building a new location on Missouri Flat Road that'll offer expanded services to the community. So we want to be part of that conversation as well. Economic development goes back to building jobs in the community. So that was it. There's a lot to digest. And I thought I'd get through this in 15 minutes. So sorry. No Paul Zapatini. Anybody else but Paul Zapatini? Go ahead, Paul. No, Aaron, yeah.
My husband has a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Figures.
So you're looking ahead, which is important. And you talk about a new platform that lets donors have more access to information. When's that going to happen?
I'm looking at Sakina. We've started having the conversation with Founded, and Sakina belongs to a network called FogNet, which is all of the finance officers from all the different community foundations. So she went out to find out, okay, what's the best platform for our size of organization, and Founded is pretty much it. We started having the conversation. Sakina's had that first basic introduction to the platform, and we'll come back to the finance committee, Mr. Finance Chair, in this next budget cycle, so we're looking at 2021. So we didn't include it in this budget cycle. We're doing that base investigation to make sure that we understand the interface of the system, and so far from what we've seen, we really like it, because it allows that donor interface. That's a really good CRM, customer relation management piece. And now Dan Sazak here, who's also the board president. He's so modest. So we'll present that back to the board, the finance committee for the next budget iteration for approval. Any other questions? Are you all sleepy? No, that's the wine. Yeah.
Interesting facts, thank you. Yeah, very scary, but interesting.
Yeah, it's change occurs. Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that one clap. Change occurs. A&S Foundation, we're going to make that change with you. And this is just a way to help inform of some of what that change is going to look like. I was reading that I got a hold of these futurists, and I became enthralled by what they see for the next 15 to 20 years, that car ownership is going to go away, and that you'll just dial up the car off of your smartphone, and the car will pull up with no driver, and it'll take you where you want to go. And so the world that we live in right now is going to look much different. But if we think back, everybody in this room, to the 60s, the late 60s, we all thought it was going to look like
Okay,
George Jetson. We did. We thought we would all be living like George Jetson. You know, but it hasn't turned out that way. So who knows where we'll end up. But we do know that change will happen. This is a phenomenal community that we get to live in. And I'm so grateful that we get to do the work we do every single day of engaging community and being a part of the work that you do. So thank you.